Hello, welcome back to another episode of Somewhere Between a Film and TV podcast. I am your host, Daniel Parra, and number one, thank you so much for listening and watching. Number two, if you could, please down below, like, comment, and subscribe. What did you think of one battle after another? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Or are you somewhere between on it? I want to know. Anyway, as for myself, let's go ahead and get started. Guys, one battle after another. I am sure you have heard the absolutely insurmountable amount of hype about this, especially if you're immersed into film. And it's even gone to the extent of people are getting hyped for it, even if they aren't necessarily, they don't pay attention to everything that happens within movies. They're like the kind of casual moviegoer. But I've seen just astronomical scores. That's like a 95 on Metacritic. It's like 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. But reviews aside, is it one of those things where we think maybe, oh, okay, well, people love it, but maybe it's just overblown. Maybe it's one of those things. Maybe it's going to be something where, yeah, sure, people are loving it right now, but then is the hype going to catch up to itself and then everyone's going to hate it and turn on it? I'm looking at you guys for doing that fairly consistently. I've seen it before, but what is one battle after another about? Bob is a washed-up revolutionary who lives in a state of stoned paranoia, surviving off-grid with his spirited and self-reliant daughter, Willa. When his evil nemesis resurfaces and Willa goes missing, the former radical scrambles to find her as both father and daughter battle the consequences of their pasts. So, pretty vague, but as for us, everything we review here will always have full spoilers, so you are safe to comment that down below. But Bob is played by Leonardo Dicaprio, who for me, I'm going to give the bios out of the way right now. I think he might be my favorite actor ever, really. He consistently impresses me every single time he's on screen. I think that I'm not one of those people that thinks that like he should have won already several times before The Revenant, but I did love his performance in The Revenant, but there are stronger things he's done, including this as well, but the past is the past. And I also want to note that Willa is played by newcomer Chase Infiniti, who is really great in this. They're both really great in this. And this is, of course, directed by Paul Thomas Anderson. And something interesting about him, to me, is he's not divisive necessarily. He's considered a generational filmmaker for good reason, because he is. But some of his movies people respond to more than others. I myself am a gigantic Inherent Vice fan. I love it so much. Not everybody does, and I totally get why, but I am one of them. I also love There Will Be Blood, of course. I do fall into that film bro category, so it is, I know the meme about the I drink your milkshake, and it's the Daniel Plainview thing where he's yelling in the TikTok edits. It's very present. I've seen it so many times. It is a great performance, but I know what people mean when they say like that. Why do they keep showing that clip over and over? But that one. Also, Phantom Thread, I saw like on a random Friday. I skipped class when I was in college, and I saw it with a bunch of elderly people at the time of my life, and like at 1 p.m. That movie was, I thought, perfect as well. And here I have to say, I thought that the marketing was funny. Usually I complain about marketing in movies for having consistent showing too much. This, I think, didn't quite know how to market itself as a movie, just because the trailers were like, what is this movie about exactly? And funny enough, watching it, I can kind of see why the trailers were cut together the way they were, because this movie feels like it's fluid in genre, that it feels like it fits into so many categories anyway, initially in the first place, that I totally get where it comes from. Like, just getting this out of the way right now. Did I love it? Did I hate it? Or am I somewhere between on it? I know that since I've started the year that I've told you guys how much I love certain things, how great things have been for movies, and I gotta say, I am yet contributing another unbelievably good movie here for the review, and I loved it so much. I thought that it had really interesting things to say that we're going to get into. I thought it had brilliant performances. It had just insane camera work and beautiful cinematography by Michael Bauman and Paul Thomas Anderson. And we're going to get into all of it. But Really, the first thing I want to acknowledge is just the free flow of it all. I think that Paul Thomas Anderson as a director, what makes him work so well is that he functions in this way that he's not bound by any specific kind of genre. I think that he's very lucky in that he makes what he wants to make, but he also just does it so well. Sometimes they lean more into comedy, sometimes they lean more into the romance aspect of things. I think that Phantom Thread is a romance at the end of it, but it's a very unconventional one. But he also does unconventional relationships quite a bit. And here, the first half hour, even initially, is where Teyana Taylor's character is introduced and where she has the most to do, because she kind of disappears after a certain point, and we are mostly following her for the first 30 minutes of it, and she kind of has a sort of Ryan Gosling in Place Beyond the Pines sort of role where all of her most significant contributions to the movie are at the beginning, but there's just a constant effect that her presence is still known because of the choices that she makes at the beginning and the consequences of them after the fact. I think that something that this movie dares to do is to give you certain perspectives, but also not give you answers for them either. I spent part of the movie kind of going, why are some of the characters acting this way? Why is it that this movie's presenting the ideas that it's presenting, but also won't give you clear answers? And honestly, I respect that so much. I think that this movie ends up leaning into the idea that it is going to present you with a lot of themes, but not a lot of answers to those themes. But Paul Thomas Anderson has always kind of been like that anyway. But it's sort of asking you, well, what do you think? What is your opinion on this if we present this? And for me, getting into the first initial 30 minutes, I would say, that is the backstory, the back part of it with Teyana Taylor and Leonardo Dicaprio, where they first meet, and the revolutionaries. And of course, contextually within that part of the movie, we learn that she is pregnant with Chase Infinity's character, who is Willa. And we don't know something that happens a lot later, but it's sort of this idea that they meet due to circumstance of their ideals and what they believe in. And once Teyana Taylor's character is caught and then put into witness protection and she disappears, I found it really interesting because part of you kind of wants to question, well, is this like selfish motivation? Is the rest of this movie even kind of her fault? Is she still alive? Because he keeps on saying that he buried her, but is that more of a mental state of his, or is that more of something that he quite literally means? Because Sean Penn's character is very scary, but also very pathetic in this movie simultaneously, because he is genuinely, he has this walk. He looks like a G.I. Joe, but like if someone were to take him and move him, he kind of operates like in the Barbie movie, but if you were like an evil G.I. Joe, essentially. And it is interesting, the antagonist in this, but I'm going to get to that later just because this movie has a lot to say. It's a lot of stuff. Like there's a lot of things that are happening here. There's a lot going on. But Teyana Taylor, all of her character's impact is felt throughout the entire rest of the movie, throughout even the antagonist and through Leonardo DiCaprio's character and through Chase Infinity. And there's a lot of like echoing parallels that are happening later on. There's this moment with Chase Infinity in the second act, where she's being held by this group of nuns in this building, and they're like, she's caused a lot of problems for us, and we can see that within you too. And there was this argument that if she's a hero or not, but they keep calling her a rat as well, because she did kind of sell them out in the first act and then just disappears. And I think it's interesting to follow that she makes that choice in the first place. And part of it is questioning you to what you think of it all, because that's kind of the point where I said this about, I think, The Long Walk, where I said that there's a lot to parse out and a lot to think about. That's the same thing here as well. I think that it's a prompt for discussion more than anything else, where character motivations, that they behave a certain way and why they are the way that they are. But especially moving into the idea of Sean Penn's character, they have this kind of like back and forth relationship with each other, and with Teyana Taylor and him. And then she, leaves witness protection because she gives up that life and then moves on, and she sort of sees how Leonardo DiCaprio's character is with the daughter, and she feels like she's not being given any attention anymore, and what causes her to do the things after the fact. But what I found really interesting about that is that leads to Sean Penn's character's like, he is part of this white nationalist organization. That this is the part of the movie where I'm gonna be like, oh, okay, so this movie has some political things to say, and it's definitely gonna, it's not, it's one of those things where I'm like, there's a certain subsect of people that are going to be like, this movie's horrible, this movie's garbage for specific reasons, but I definitely don't align with that. But that's what the movie offers and has to say. And it treats these white nationalists as this, they are antagonists in the sense that they're also really kind of goofy in how they're villainous. They're goofy in the sense that they are portrayed as stupid people, that like the thing that they believe in, the way they talk is so matter of fact about the awful things that they believe in and this how they believe in these things, but they're also kind of trying to keep this a secret as like, oh well, and the Sean Penn's whole thing is he's trying to join this club anyway, and it ends up sort of reading as like these guys are kind of just playing like, you know, boy like clicky groups that they're not like, I'm not gonna let you into my club because you did this one thing a long time ago, and then they sort of show them as these like petulant man children. And I thought that was really interesting because it leads to really a lot of what the rest of the movie's about. And I think that it's offering stuff to say, but based off of how you react to it is kind of a litmus, I think, for how the movie itself sort of plays out. There's an entire second act in here that has one of the best and kind of funniest foot chases I've ever seen. I want to address the reviews really quick that this movie does have like generational hype to it. People are saying like, this is an all-timer, instant classic. And of course you go into it already hearing that. You're sort of waiting for, you're like, okay, there's got to be like a clicking point. Like, where does this happen for you that people are saying this? For me, I was already into it from minute one, but the thing where I was like, I noticed a guy next to me and myself, we were both like leaned in the entire time. And I remember I was kind of like this. I was like hand over the mouth, just sort of really invested. Forgot that I had popcorn even, wasn't even eating it anymore. And part of the reason why was because this movie does feel like a ticking time bomb because of Leonardo DiCaprio's character himself. I think that it's supposed to be kind of a pacing metaphor, if you can even call it that, for how Leonardo DiCaprio's character sort of feels. But he also feels like he's kind of bumbling through every single minute of it because he's like a washed up has been before being a revolutionary because he left that life behind a little bit. He's like staying because he's so paranoid and for the sake of his daughter. And it's crazy because there's this foot chase that happens where he gets arrested because he falls 40 feet down a tree while they're bouncing between buildings. And he's trying to follow these guys that are like part of this other kind of group for immigration, which I'm going to get to in a second. And Benicio Del Toro's character, and he falls and he gets arrested, but it's crazy because he's trying to keep up with them. I like this a lot because it shows the kind of physical attention and performance that at the beginning he's really active and he's all over the place. You know, he's the guy that can like move back and forth and set the bombs and stuff. And now he's finally kind of left a life behind and his body's catching up to him because he hasn't kept up that life that he had, you know, held up. And there's these guys that are like skateboarding and they're like parkour people. They're going across the tops of the buildings, and it's just really intense, but it's also kind of humorous in how it's playing out, but the camera won't stop moving. And then the score by Johnny Greenwood, that's phenomenal, by the way. I think it's one of the best scores of the year and really heavily contributes to what the movie's doing in terms of its pacing, how it's like all over the place. It's really well done, but it also feels so tightly constructed. It's kind of like this piano thing, but then it'll escalate and get really heavy. But that chase, the way it's coordinated, the way the camera moves is so well done. And I think it's like a tracking shot, but it also feels, because this was shot on VistaVision, so the graininess of the film is gorgeous. And there's that scene where they're all running across the rooftops, and there's like this really, really dark blue saturation while they're jumping on the roofs of the buildings, right? And you can see the shadows of them while they're moving, and there's this riot happening down below. And what I found really fascinating about this was there was also a interview that I was watching earlier with Benicio Del Toro and Leonardo Dicaprio, where they were talking about how that entire middle portion of the movie, which does end up making the rest of the movie feel like just one really extended, very long kind of chase scene and back and forth. I get what the title is, one battle after another, because it is just one thing after another. When you're trying to, it's like code for incite a revolution. You're trying to do all these things, and it is just a consistent battle for your ideals and for the things that you believe in and the people challenging them, like Sean Penn. And what I found really interesting is that they said that Benicio Del Toro kind of left because he was on a different production for a few months. I'm not sure what it was, but then he came back and he had this idea for that middle portion that they're trying to evade immigration. They're bringing these people back and forth and trying to bring them over, and it's like a sort of safe haven for people that are trying to move over into the US. And I found that it was really interesting because he said that that was kind of added after the fact, but it actually upholds the idea of the movie. One of the things at the very beginning that I was kind of curious about was, are they going to address the thing that they are trying to be revolutionary for? It's one of those things where, yeah, you definitely could make the idea of revolution, but also not address what it's about and still make a solid statement. It could be about, the higher power, the whatever. But Benicio Del Toro's character and Sean Penn's character and what they're both involved in, they show, instead of being the implicit, like what's going on under the surface, they show what's happening under the surface. Benicio Del Toro is trying to escort people over from, I believe, Mexico, and give them a safe haven. And he's running this, I think they called it like the Latin Harriet Tubman in the movie. And then Sean Penn's character is also dealing with this ideal of there are certain things under the surface about these people that are like, pulling the strings. It's like white nationalism kind of thing about like white supremacy and the people that he's dealing with in that aspect. And to me, what I found interesting about that is I don't think it gave a very explicit, while that was shown, I don't know if there was any explicit message. I think that Paul Thomas Anderson is trading in the idea of what these people believe in and what they're fighting for, but he also didn't really give any kind of statement of his own as a filmmaker about that. But I think it's up to you to determine what that all means. And I found that really fascinating because I think that obviously this movie's probably going to anger some people, and I think that's totally fine. I think it's fine for art to spark a specific type of conversation. And I think what was really interesting about it is just kind of what it was saying about how we sort of act as people and how we kind of generate our own thoughts on things and what's shown. I think that at the end of it all, though, really what this is all showing, what this all means, even if you were to take all of the political stuff out of it, if you were to take just the idea alone of what these people believe in as revolutionaries, I think that really, at the end of it all, it is a father-daughter story, and about how whether or not you have family that you are connected to or whatever it may be, that you pass on your ideals to a newer generation, to the people that you love. I think that's kind of what separates this movie from some others, and especially because it kind of does lean into the action genre, but it really is about the father-daughter relationship and kind of about how her mom is gone, right, wherever she may be. But there's the message of the movie kind of doesn't come until the very end, where they're talking about how she has this letter, and it's like, what do you look like? Are you loved? Are you all of these things? And it's really kind of like, do you still have the drive to fight for what you believe in? Because Leonardo DiCaprio and Teyana Taylor, they kind of lost their way a little bit in terms of what they believed and why, and the challenges of the world. But it boiled down to, through all of the trials and tribulations of the world, whether you are someone that, I think that's why they were, the revolutionaries that they were, to show that they do go and put themselves through. These are our morals, our ideals, and no matter what hard things come through our way, we will fight for it. Well, are you molded by the sort of landscape of the world itself? Do you let people sort of push you around, or do you still fight for the things that you think are morally correct at the end of the day? And I think that's why this movie has that drive that it has. It has this really kind of like undertone of something that feels like it's sparking the entire time. And I think the reason for that to be conveyed is because it is a constant challenge of, what do you believe in? Why do you believe in that? And how far are you willing to go to challenge that belief, really, in terms of what it is you're fighting for? And I think that's brilliant. I think that Leonardo DiCaprio, what I find really interesting about his performance is he is kind of a bum. I mean, he is a bum. He's a loser. He even says to himself, like, he's like drug addled. He's a drug addict. And I find that really interesting because I think the idea of him being that way, and then like it does lead to a lot of very funny stuff. This is also a very funny movie. It's very satirical in what it's about as well, and lends itself into that and leans into the kind of making fun of the things that it wants to make fun of, but also that there's this one moment, there's a conversation in the middle where he's getting really mad at a person he's on the phone with, and this happens multiple times. I like the bit a lot, and he cannot for the life of him remember the whole like revolutionary code thing that they were supposed to learn. And part of him is kind of like, he's like, why did we do this? And I like that a lot, that he's kind of like, why did we have so much of this in place initially in the first place? And him questioning that when he's a lot older, while there's these people that firmly believe in the way that he used to be, I found really interesting, just as a commentary on like, generational stuff, and how people that are of different generations, you're like, oh yeah, I remember when I used to be like that, and how certain people of certain groups change over the course of time. And I also ended up really liking that commentary about that as well, really. And I think that Benicio Del Toro's character has his own thing that he's kind of, being revolutionary for. And at what extent do you end up taking it too far for personal gain is kind of what Teyana Taylor's thing was doing, like towards the first 30 minutes, where she takes something a little bit too far, and then you're kind of like, but at the extent of what, really? For the sake of who? And it kind of separates, it makes you question, like, well, what part of it is being revolutionary, and what part of it is like sort of inciting something because you feel a certain type of way about something. And that's a lot of the moral stuff of this movie, but we haven't even talked about I talked about the rooftop chase scene, but there's one of the best car chases I've ever seen in this movie. There's actually a couple, but the one that I'm really talking about is on a hill. And they even gave it an IMAX poster. I totally get why now. Where it is in the perspective of the car itself. It's like the bumper. And it is this wavy up and down thing in the third act. And it's almost it's captivating. It's sort of transformative in the way you're looking at it. It makes you feel like it almost kind of puts you in the perspective that you're in a roller coaster. I thought it was hilarious. There was a D-box choice for this. There's no way that was really utilized. I mean, there was a lot of stuff happening, but there's no way that it wasn't just the D-box thing. And it was just kind of like shaking you up and down. I thought that was funny that I saw that it was like that, but I thought that the way the camera moved was really kind of hypnotic, and it was this third act thing of like, it was languid, but it was also intense because of the music and because of the context of what was happening. And then this movie also has things on its mind, I believe, if I read this correctly, interpreted it correctly, about trafficking as well, and wanted to touch on that for a bit up until the character gets kind of fed up. He's like, I don't do kids, man, to Sean Penn's character when they're trying to transport Chase Infiniti. And then that sort of moral dilemma that guy, he's very briefly in this movie, was dealing with while he was moving her, and he made that choice, I thought was really interesting, because it ends up just being a lot of these characters are making specific choices for themselves. They're like, I draw the line there. This is my moral belief. I will not do that. And it ends up underscoring kind of the underworld of certain parts of the world, whether it be the revolutionary aspect of it, whether it be the people that are in play behind whatever it may be. I remember, like, I honestly thought this movie reminded me of Eddington quite a bit, but Eddington also had like this third act extremism thing going on as well. But it, like, to me, that sort of read as like paranoia in his brain and Joaquin Phoenix's character. And here, I think this is a better movie than Eddington, but also I think that movie is underrated. I loved it, but Here, I think what's different is it's very literal. It's very matter of fact. Of course, it's satirical, but like the stuff happening here, we know for a fact is going on, and it ends up sort of reading as all these characters making choices and what they fully believe in and why. And I think at the end of it all, again, replacing all of the, just removing all the political context, it is taking what your parents believed, passing it on to the further generations, and it's up to you. Do you firmly believe in that? Do you also want to change the world? If you fully believe in that, if you have that young energy, is that something that is an ideal that's passed on? Is it something that keeps going? Or is it something that dies with the previous generations to just be forgot about? And Sean Penn's character, what he ends up believing in, he ends up being his own demise essentially because of a twist of the movie that I didn't really see coming, is that Chase Infinity's character is his daughter. And he's trying to join this extremism group because for me, it read as like a validation thing of like, I'm a superior being, because he even repeats it. And that's what their firm belief is, that they're like, you know, that you're not just great, you're not good or whatever. He's like, you are superior, which is, you know, the coding of that is very what it is. And then they end up killing him because they find that out. And like this kind of like, it reminded me of the Coen brothers and how they would send a villain out. It's very pathetic and very sad for him, and there's no part of you that really sympathizes with him, but you also understood exactly what it was he wanted. A sort of, maybe it was validation of a sort, maybe it was really whatever it could be, just as the thing that he believed in, that he like had something that he wanted to show for as well. And I think that part of the whole revolutionary thing of like Teyana Taylor as well, as he saw something in that he was like, she firmly believes in, and she's her own person, she has something to show for it, results. And then he kind of ends up wanting the same thing, is sort of how that read to me, but he goes in about it a completely different way. And overall, I thought that this movie was just thematically about so much, but I also thought that it kind of had a different approach in what it was saying about how it was saying it. It was kind of asking you what you thought of it as well. And I thought that while it definitely had a lot of political things to say about, you know, current climate stuff, for sure, I thought it took that. And I think the reason why Paul Thomas Anderson finally made a modern movie instead of something that was kind of set, you know, prior in the past, is because I think that the context of it felt a lot more close to home because of the current situation of the world right now, what's going on in the world right now. And so you end up translating to it even more. And I think even just on a first viewing, because this is one of those things where I think it is a heavy text in terms of being about a lot. I think it requires repeat viewings, but at the moment, first time around, it's very funny. It is insanely thrilling, and it's also just really well directed. You know that though about Paul Thomas Anderson, but I think it's interesting because this is also maybe his most mainstream movie he's ever made. I know Boogie Nights is kind of considered an all-timer for a lot of people, but I think that the middle portion of his stuff, I think that there's kind of some stuff that maybe not everybody will gravitate to. And I think that this is very interesting in the fact that it feels like a mainstream blockbuster, but also doesn't, because it has so much going on and so many things that it wants to address and talk about. But if you can't tell already, I think that this movie, before I give my score, I want to address one thing. This movie's 2 hours and I think 45 minutes. It's nearly 3 hours long. You never feel it. And one of the big reasons I want to say why, and I don't think we ever talk about this too much on the show, is the score is incredible. I think that it aids the entire thing so well. It makes it feel like this just constant anxiety, this constant rampant, everything is happening all the time. And there's one contrast I love that's really underscored by the score. It's pay attention to, there's this one sort of like long tracking shot of Benicio Del Toro. He is so calm in this movie. I think he shouts once, but it's to get them moving so he can escort them somewhere else, the people that he's with. And he looks so calm. The way that they arrest him and he does this dance is so funny. And pay attention to how he acts compared to whenever Leonardo Dicaprio is on the phone, his character Bob. Compare and contrast how all over the place and rampant and just discombobulated Leonardo DiCaprio's character is compared to them. There's such a contrast there, and then it's funny because the score is just like really kind of, I don't know if it's jazzy is what I would describe it as, but it's very just like rampant. And then he does not help. He ends up making the entire situation a lot more like intense instead of being calm. But their whole dynamic is one of my favorite things about this movie, and they're like, they've got like a buddy thing going on, and he just like idolizes Leonardo DiCaprio's character a little bit, and it just ended up being this contrast thing whenever they're, driving in that chase scene where he has them roll out of the car, but they're drinking Modelo's while they're drinking and driving. The amount of drinking and driving in this movie is hilarious. There's even a scene where Benicio Del Toro's character says, "I know how to drink and drive." Oh no, that was Leonardo DiCaprio that said that, but still, I thought it was so funny. But man, yeah, overall, I talked nonstop about this just now, but it's kind of funny. I feel like there's so much more to say, but it's one of those things that I feel like comes from another viewing, and I want to see it again. I thought this was a perfect movie. I thought this was easily going to give my score now a 5 out of 5. It might be the best movie of the year. It really might be. But what did you guys think of One Battle After Another? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Or are you somewhere between on it? What did you think it was about? I gave my thoughts. I'm curious what you think about it, though. Up next is The Smashing Machine, starring The Rock, or Dwayne The Rock Johnson. I'm very excited for that. I can't wait to see him in something where he's trying, much like Pain and Gain. It's been too long. But again, thank you guys so much for listening and watching. If you could, please, again, one more time, like, comment, and subscribe. Get to hear all the things about me talking about all the stuff I love. Man, it's been so cool. This movie was phenomenal. I'm riding a crazy high off of it right now. But thank you guys again so much for listening and watching. I'll see you next time.